Welcome to another episode of the True Facts series, where we uncover the mysteries hidden beneath the deep sea. Today, we're going to discuss something truly deep sea: fear and immobility. This footage was captured in the year 2000 by a diver inside the blue hole. Take a close look at 1705. He glides past the last diver. The footage is sinking rapidly. The cameraman seems to sense danger, but he cannot call for help. The last diver has his back turned. He doesn't see the cameraman. At this moment, the cameraman turns the lens towards the surface. Sunlight forms a tunnel, but the downward pull quickly drags the camera back towards the bottom of the ocean. His breathing becomes heavy. You can feel his tension. Then a trumpet-like sound blares. The walls of the blue hole come into view. It seems like he is trying to grab onto something, but he fails. The footage continues to sink. In just a matter of seconds, the light dims drastically. At 1708, the cameraman glances at his depth gauge. It reads 265.75 feet. We hear a chilling, terrified scream from the rear wall. The descent continues. Can the cameraman save himself? This blue hole where the footage was taken is the Dahab blue hole, infamous among divers. Located off the Red Sea coast of the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, it is incredibly close to the shore. No boat or deep-sea expedition is required. With the right gear, even a beginner diver can simply wade into the water and reach it. The blue hole is one of the rarest marine geological wonders on Earth. Most of them were formed during the ancient ice ages, when sea levels were much lower. For instance, if there was a limestone cave or a meteorite crater at the time, rising sea levels would eventually cause its roof to collapse, filling it with seawater. This process creates a stark contrast between the shallow, turquoise waters outside the hole and the deep, inky blue inside. Because the Dahab blue hole is so easily accessible, it was the first blue hole to be explored extensively, and it set the standard for the term blue hole. To this day, when divers mention a blue hole without any specification, they are most likely referring to the one in Dahab. Later, more blue holes were discovered around the world, around a dozen in total. The largest is the Great Blue Hole in Belize, Caribbean. The deepest, at one point, was Dean's Blue Hole in the Bahamas. But the deepest known blue hole today is a recent discovery, Dragon Hole in the South China Sea. When lined up together, the Dahab blue hole appears to be the least remarkable. Yet, in reality, it is the most treacherous and terrifying of them all. It carries an indescribable sense of dread and an air of mystery, much like the biblical events that once took place on the Sinai Peninsula. But how exactly did this blue hole form? To this day, science has no definitive explanation. Locals, however, believe that it was formed by a massive iron meteorite falling from the sky. Scientists, however, argue that based on the shape of the hole's edges, it is unlikely to be a meteorite crater. Instead, it more closely resembles an ancient limestone cave. However, the cave formation theory struggles to explain the many unusual structures found inside the blue hole. If we were to unfold a topographical map of the hole, it would reveal some intriguing features. At the outermost edge of the blue hole, there is a 20-foot deep depression known as the saddle. If a diver crosses the saddle, the outer sea cliff plunges over 3,280 feet. The deepest part of the blue hole itself reaches approximately 394 feet. Between 394 feet and 174 feet, there is a large archway opening. The arch's dome is 85 feet thick, facing southeast, allowing sunlight to filter through. Diving through this passage, bathed in natural light, creates the surreal feeling of being illuminated by divine light. For this reason, divers affectionately call it the underwater cathedral. Swimming through the underwater cathedral is an extraordinary experience. About 656 feet northeast of the blue hole, there is another, smaller blue hole known as El Bells, often used as an entry point for beginner divers. Fully equipped, a diver can jump in and experience El Bells like an elevator descending into the abyss. As you sink, you will see soft coral-covered walls and a diverse range of marine life. Upon reaching 98 feet, you will pass through an arch-like gateway, and suddenly, the view opens up. You have entered the open sea beyond the reef wall. From there, divers follow an underwater drift dive along the coral reef wall, eventually returning to the 20-foot deep saddle of the blue hole. For those who are brave and experienced enough, there is an alternative route, descending deeper and swimming back into the blue hole through the arch's dome, silhouetted against the sunlight. Unlike many open-sea dive sites, the blue hole lacks strong ocean currents or aggressive sharks, making the dive seem as calm and peaceful as swimming in a giant natural pool. The cave walls provide protection, adding to the eerie serenity of the site. However, beneath this calm and tranquil facade, a deadly danger lurks. If you visit Dahab for a dive, you will typically arrive by car and walk along a small path to the entrance of El Bells. Along this path, you will notice a memorial wall covered in plaques. Each plaque represents a diver who lost their life in the blue hole. According to estimates, the blue hole has claimed between 130 and 200 divers in recent years. Since no official records are kept, the actual number may be even higher. One of the people who has contributed to this estimate is Tarek, a Bedouin diver from Egypt. Since the 1990s, he has been involved in recovering the bodies of lost divers. He recalls that the number was so high that at a certain point he stopped counting. He also stopped remembering their names, as it became too painful. Yet, over the past decades, Tarek vividly remembers the day he found two bodies at a depth of 102 meters, tightly embracing each other. These divers were Gara and O'Regan, ages 22 and 23 respectively. Sitting under a sunshade at the edge of the desert, sipping his tea and gazing at the waves crashing against the shore, Tarek recounts their tragic fate. He recalls finding them at a depth of 102 meters, tightly embracing each other. The situation must have unfolded like this. One of them encountered a problem and started sinking uncontrollably, while the other tried to help but ended up losing consciousness as well. In the depths of the sea, what could they have done? Their memorial plaque is right over there, Tarek says, guiding the way toward the memorial wall and pointing at a black marble plaque etched with the words, "In loving memory." Tarek rarely talks about the divers he has retrieved, and journalists had to gather information from multiple sources to piece together the story of Gara and O'Regan. Gara was a well-trained diving instructor who arrived in Egypt from Ireland in 1997 to work as a dive instructor for a year. During this time, his close friend O'Regan joined him. The two planned to start a travel company in Dahab, specializing in diving tools. However, in November of that year, just a month before returning home, they embarked on one last dive in the blue hole. This dive was organized by an international diving club and was attended by many experienced divers. However, when the group resurfaced, Gara and O'Regan were missing. Later, an investigation revealed that the two fell victim to nitrogen narcosis and oxygen toxicity. In their final moments, they lost consciousness while tightly embracing each other. In the Dahab blue hole, divers typically use scuba diving equipment, which is commonly referred to as oxygen tanks. However, these tanks do not actually contain pure oxygen. Instead, they are filled with compressed air, which has the same composition as the air we breathe on land, 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen. Oxygen is, of course, essential for breathing. Without it, we would suffocate. But the greater proportion of nitrogen plays a different role. On land, nitrogen is inert, sitting passively in our lungs, waiting to be exhaled. However, things change dramatically underwater. For every 33 feet of descent, the pressure increases by 1 additional atmosphere. By the time a diver reaches 98 to 131 feet, the pressure exerted on the body is 4 to 5 times that of the surface. At this depth, the nitrogen in the lungs is forced into the bloodstream due to the intense pressure. The effect of nitrogen in the bloodstream is similar to alcohol intoxication. Experienced divers often compare it to drinking, Every 33 feet of descent is like having a shot of strong liquor. For example, if a diver reaches the 174-foot depth of the underwater cathedral, the effects of nitrogen narcosis would be equivalent to consuming 7 to 8 shots of strong liquor. Many divers have reported experiencing strange hallucinations at this depth. Some claim to have seen the cathedral bathed in divine light. Others say they heard Bach's music, while some completely blacked out, experiencing visions of miracles they could not recall later. This phenomenon is called nitrogen narcosis, often referred to as rapture of the deep. It's similar to alcohol intoxication. If you've ever been drunk, you know that if you want to hear Bach or Mozart, you will. Just like alcohol tolerance, nitrogen narcosis can be trained over time. Experienced divers develop higher nitrogen tolerance and can dive deeper and stay submerged longer without being severely affected. However, diving with compressed air also has a hard depth limit. This limit is generally considered to be 184 feet due to the increasing partial pressure of oxygen in the air mixture. At sea level, oxygen makes up 21% of the air we breathe, resulting in an oxygen partial pressure of 0.21 units. At a depth of 184 feet, the pressure increases 5.6 times, meaning the oxygen partial pressure becomes 1.38, dangerously close to the 1.4 unit limit. If a diver exceeds this limit, they risk oxygen toxicity, a far deadlier condition than nitrogen narcosis. Oxygen toxicity directly affects the central nervous system, lungs and eyes, causing cell death in these areas. If central nervous system cells die suddenly, it can lead to confusion, convulsions, and seizures. If lung cells die, the diver will suffer from severe respiratory distress, chest pain, and difficulty breathing. The first part of the eye affected is the retina, and retinal cell death could lead to detached retinas and sudden blindness. Additionally, oxygen toxicity can destroy red blood cells, which are responsible for transporting oxygen to the organs. If red blood cells are destroyed, the organs will be starved of oxygen, leading to organ failure and death. Oxygen toxicity is one of the greatest nightmares for deep-sea divers. Some say that anyone daring to take a deep breath below 164 feet is borrowing time from death itself. Tarek, the Bedouin diver, points to a memorial plaque and tells the story of Igor Chalet, a Russian diver. On November 7, 2011, Igor made his final dive. His logbook showed he had already completed 400 dives. The Dahab blue hole was supposed to be his 401st. Confident in his experience, he descended deep into the outer wall of the blue hole, reaching 295 feet. At this point, he encountered a Swedish diver who noticed that Igor's movements seemed unsteady, much like observing someone who has had too much to drink but is still conscious. The Swedish diver warned Igor, suggesting that something was off. But Igor simply gave an okay sign and continued his dive. Don't worry. Igor, filled with reckless confidence, continued his descent to 394 feet, then pushed even further to 492 feet, far beyond his planned depth. By doing so, he overexerted himself, depleting his strength, time, and air supply. On his way back up at 427 feet, he began experiencing breathing difficulties. At that moment, Igor was like a drunken man, suddenly startled awake. His panic led him to make a fatal mistake. He rushed to ascend too quickly. Witnesses on the surface later reported hearing his desperate calls for help. When they looked down, they saw him inflating like an overpressurized balloon, a tragic sign of decompression sickness. Tarek continued, pointing at another plaque. 20, this one belongs to Stephen Keenan. Keenan was a 40-year-old, highly experienced diving instructor. At the time, he was assisting Alessia Zecchini, a world champion freediver, who had come to challenge the Blue Hole's arch, attempting to swim through it in a single breath without any diving equipment, not even fins. However, deep underwater, Zecchini lost her sense of direction. Keenan rushed to her aid, guiding her back toward the surface, but in the process he himself blacked out and never woke up again. Tarek pointed to another plaque dated April 28, 2000. "This is one of the most well-known cases," he said. He was the cameraman who captured the footage from the beginning of our story. In the video, the diver first appears near the surface, surrounded by other divers, with bright coral, fish, and crystal-clear blue water around him. He adjusts his camera, carefully attaching a protective lens cover, which gives the footage a reddish tint, indicating that he was preparing for a deep dive. This protective lens is designed to withstand pressure at 246 feet, suggesting that he was confident about reaching at least the underwater cathedral. As he descended, he first encountered two divers ahead of him. Their long, rising air bubbles and their steady kicking made it seem as if they were talking to each other. The cameraman swam past them effortlessly, his focus fixed on the depths ahead. Then he saw two streams of bubbles rising from even deeper. Without hesitation, he headed straight for them, toward the black abyss below. Over the next minute and a half, he adjusted his gear, stabilized his camera, and at 70:05:38, he finally reached the source of the deep bubbles. At this point, something seemed wrong. His equipment might have malfunctioned. He appeared to seek help from another diver, but his camera sank rapidly, the screen darkening as he fell deeper. Suddenly, the camera captured a rocky underwater wall. Some believe that he was trying to grab onto it to stop his descent. Others speculate that at this stage he was still unaware of his critical situation and continued his dive with confidence. The next few moments are crucial. Pay attention to his breathing pattern and the changes in light. This footage shows the raw, unfiltered reality of the blue hole. Another sheer cliff appears, the red glow of the lens intensifies, and in the diver's breathing we hear a faint, almost mechanical sound. Some believe it was a panic-stricken cry, while others claim they can decipher words, perhaps a desperate call for help. But the camera continued its rapid descent, the depth increasing by the second. The footage turned pitch black, a terrifying void. At this point, he had exceeded the 184-foot safety limit. The sunlight had disappeared entirely, and in just a few minutes, it was as if he had downed an entire bottle of liquor. Nitrogen narcosis had begun to take over his mind. At 17:08, he glanced at his depth gauge, 266 feet. Tarek once explained that the Red Sea is different from other bodies of water. The water here is denser and heavier, which affects pressure levels. While most divers consider 184 feet the standard depth limit for compressed air diving, in the Dahab blue hole, it might be as shallow as 131 feet. If Tarek's assessment is correct, then this diver had already entered the danger zone much earlier than he realized. At this point, Yuri had already exceeded twice the safe oxygen limit. Oxygen toxicity can strike suddenly, and combined with nitrogen narcosis, he was already drifting into unconsciousness. In the next few seconds, he appeared to be searching for a place to rest. Then, a hissing sound of inflation was heard, followed by a dull explosion. Clouds of sediment rushed into view, obscuring the camera. The footage shook violently, and Yuri's fins detached from his feet. Finally, at 17:11, the camera stopped moving. Then, the feed cut off entirely. The next scene in the video jumps forward to May 3rd, 2000. Two figures flicker briefly on screen. Tarek explains Yuri was only 22 years old. His parents arrived in Dahab the very next day. At his mother's insistence, I dove down to 377 feet and found him. I retrieved his body and equipment. On May 3rd, this footage was recorded as I handed the camera back to his parents. What you see here is them testing the camera. Tarek sighed. Yuri came to Dahab alone. I warned him twice. I even saw him just an hour before his dive. He wanted to film the arch, so I told him, "Then you should train with me for 2 weeks first." But he only had a weekend. He refused. He went in alone, with just one buddy and 2 tanks of air. Tarek always warns young divers about the dangers of the blue hole. Yuri's final footage serves as a silent warning, a reminder that nature's beauty and peril go hand in hand. Human arrogance will never conquer the ocean. We are small, so small. Yuri's full video is easy to find with a simple search. The most heartbreaking part? It all happened so fast. 1 second, the water was calm and peaceful. The next, he was lost in the abyss. Some experts have analyzed the final moments of the footage. Yuri panicked. He tried to inflate his vest to ascend, but either his inflation system failed or he overinflated it, causing his air bladder to burst. In those final moments, he lost control, stirring up clouds of sediment. Perhaps he believed that by removing his heavy equipment, he could still swim to the surface. But later, Tarek confirmed Yuri had 12 kilograms of weight strapped to him, far too much. Combined with equipment malfunctions and panic-induced errors, it led to a tragic and irreversible outcome. That concludes the story of Dahab's Blue Hole, a place filled with both the awe-inspiring power and terrifying mystery of nature. The fear of the deep sea is primal, yet it also stirs an innate curiosity within us, passed down through our very genes. The Great Blue Hole. About 56 miles off the coast of Belize, the Great Blue Hole is one of the most visually perfect blue holes on Earth. It is 1,043 feet wide and 407 feet deep, sitting in the center of the stunning Lighthouse Reef. In 1971, the legendary diver and father of modern scuba diving, Jacques-Yves Cousteau, arrived at the site aboard his famous research vessel, Calypso. Without hesitation, he declared it one of the 5 best scuba diving locations in the world. Today, most tourists experience it from above, either by plane, helicopter, or boat, getting stunning aerial or surface views. By studying these layers, scientists can reconstruct past weather patterns, uncovering critical information about how civilizations rose and fell. Belize is not only home to the Great Blue Hole, but also to vast jungles and ancient abandoned Mayan cities. The Maya civilization mysteriously collapsed around 900 AD, one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. The Maya suddenly abandoned their grand cities, vanishing into the dense jungle without explanation. For centuries, scholars have debated the cause: war, famine, disease. But the expedition to the Great Blue Hole revealed a new theory, a cataclysmic chain of climate events. First, unprecedented hurricanes devastated the region, bringing massive floods. Then, a prolonged period of severe drought followed. The combination of these two disasters forced the Maya to abandon their cities, retreating into the unforgiving jungle in search of survival. Dean's Blue Hole, the most visually striking underwater wonder. Among all the blue holes on Earth, Dean's Blue Hole is perhaps the most visually dramatic. Unlike the Dahab Blue Hole, which is primarily used for scuba diving, Dean's Blue Hole has become a paradise for freedivers, those who dive without any equipment, relying solely on a single breath. Dean's Blue Hole features a narrow opening at the surface, forming a natural underwater sand beach. At the center of this shallow area lies a massive, bottomless abyss. Unlike scuba diving, freediving requires extraordinary breath control, physical endurance, and mental discipline. Over the years, freedivers have left behind incredible footage of their dives. Videos capturing them leaping off the edge of the abyss, gracefully dancing in the water and diving like golden fish into the depths. One of the most legendary freed divers in history, William Trubridge, set a world record here. In April 2010, he descended to 302 feet without the use of fins, holding his breath the entire time. Later, in November of the same year, he broke his own record, reaching 331 feet, all in a single breath. The entire dive, from descent to resurfacing, took just 4 minutes and 9 seconds. Freediving, a battle against nature. Freediving, unlike scuba diving, does not involve breathing in compressed gases, which means there is no risk of decompression sickness. Instead, freed divers face 2 major physiological challenges: nitrogen narcosis and stress-induced bradycardia, a slowing heart rate response to deep dives. Mammals, including humans, naturally lower their heart rates while diving, a built-in survival mechanism that allows them to conserve oxygen. This primal instinct can trigger a feeling of fetal-like tranquility, but at the same time, The cold and claustrophobic environment of the deep sea can induce an overwhelming sense of fear. Dragon Hole, the deepest blue hole ever discovered. Much like Dean's blue hole, Dragon Hole is an underwater abyss that appears suddenly in the middle of a shallow seabed, creating a visually stunning contrast between light and darkness. However, what sets Dragon Hole apart is its depth, an astonishing 984 feet, making it the deepest known blue hole in the world. Local fishermen have long passed down myths about Dragon Hole, claiming it was formed when Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, pulled out the legendary Rui Jing Bang, the sea-calming staff, leaving behind an enormous void in the ocean. But scientific expeditions have uncovered a far more astonishing reality. Dragon Hole is not just a single vertical pit, but a highly intricate system of underwater caves and tunnels. On maps, Dragon Hole may resemble a long cylindrical sock, but in reality, many unexplored branches and tunnels extend from it. These hidden passages might lead to even greater depths, or perhaps even connect to other underwater cave networks in ways we have yet to understand. A window into Earth's prehistoric past. The 984-foot depth of Dragon Hole also presents a remarkable paleoclimatic mystery. If an ancient cave system was able to form so deep underwater, it suggests that at some point in Earth's history, sea levels were at least 984 feet lower than they are today. To put this into perspective, if the total volume of water on Earth remained constant and sea levels dropped by 984 feet today, imagine how massive the ice sheets would have been. An ice age of that magnitude would have covered vast portions of the planet in thick, impenetrable ice. It is terrifying to imagine how human civilization would have survived in such extreme conditions. Perhaps this is nature's way of reminding us of our fragility. The fear of deep water is not just psychological, it is ingrained in our very DNA, a response shaped by millennia of adaptation to a changing Earth. And with that, today's story comes to an end. Thank you all for listening.